Let's talk about executive orders.
Sign some executive orders.
I'm going to be signing shortly an executive order.
This first executive order.
Executive order.
Presidential executive orders have been around since George Washington. Most executive orders are directed to officials who serve at the pleasure of the president, and many of whom have been confirmed by the Senate, to do two things. One, direct their activities, and secondly, to help establish priorities as to what he wants them to concentrate their activities on. A law that is passed by Congress must be signed by the president and is generally the product of a negotiation between the two branches of government. Legislation also includes the authority to appropriate money and to expend it. Executive orders do not have the same force of law. That is to say, he cannot order the expenditure of money that has not already been appropriated for some purpose. Executive orders have been used by presidents in a wide number of ways. For example, Harry Truman determined by executive order to desegregate the armed forces. They had been segregated up through 1948, including throughout the Second World War. A counterexample would be Richard Nixon's use of the executive order to impose wage and price controls. In this instance, in 1970, with inflation rising, the Congress had passed a statute authorizing but not requiring the president to issue wage and price controls if he considered it necessary. So he was not simply acting on his own. In this instance, it was an example, I think an unfortunate one, because the wage and price controls didn't work, but the president was acting using his executive authority that had been granted by the Congress. There are very few limitations on what the president can issue, but when he does issue an executive order, it can be checked in a number of ways. One way it can be checked is through the courts. And if you look at the executive orders that President Trump has issued in the first 100 days of his second term, almost 30% of them now have been challenged in court. Secondly, if the Congress doesn't like it, they can go ahead and pass a statute that would prevent this executive order from remaining in effect. But that's very unlikely to happen because the president who has issued the executive order can veto a piece of legislation. You'd have to have 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to override that. But the third is that there is nothing prohibiting a president's successor from coming into office and immediately revoking executive orders. In fact, this is now routinely done. Are executive orders a sign of weakness or strength? Well, in fact, they're both. They're highly visible. They look like the president is in charge. They send a signal to the president's supporters that he is taking action. They are a dramatic way of signaling that someone is in charge and things are getting done. At the same time, they can be a sign of weakness in two senses. They're weak in that they are impermanent and relatively easy to overturn. And secondly, is the matter of opportunity costs, because when you focus so intensely on doing things by executive order, you are by definition not devoting that time, attention, effort, and energy of the people around you to passing legislation. Right now, we have a Republican president and slender Republican majorities in both House and Senate. But we've seen very little legislative activity up till now, and in part that's because the attention has been focused almost exclusively on executive orders and actions. What is in doubt is what is going to be the effect of these executive orders and to what extent they can be maintained against challenges by them from the courts, challenges to them by the Congress, and challenges to them by whoever succeeds the current president, because they will almost certainly, in many instances, have a different take on policy and try to do things their way rather than his way.